Welcome, everybody. It is another amazing interview coming up here. We are back in the Crypt. I am your host, Crypt Rick, of course, and I welcome everybody once again to join me. And I got a great show lined up tonight. I'm really excited to have this guest on. We're going to be getting into a little bit of a darker area for this interview, which I always say these are topics that we have to talk about and they need to be talked about more. And I really, I do believe that, guys, as you know. And so we're going to be getting into energy vampires. We're going to be talking probably of the problem with the dating sites that are out there now. They're like this whole, I tell you guys, because I'm older, I mean, there was a way that people dated back when I was in the dating scene, which was many years ago, I do admit. But there was an art to dating. There was something that, it was something that took time. And now, what I've learned from my friends that are single, and I talk to people with what's going on in the dating apps and with the availability of pornography now. I mean, this all ties in, and I'm going to be getting into this with my guest. I'm really excited to talk about these topics. And yes, a lot of people think they're dark topics, which they are. Let's be honest, they are. And there's definitely an agenda going on. So I'm really excited to just get into it and really cover these topics and, see what we can find out because it's definitely having an effect on society and what's going on, this satanic mindset that people are adopting and living, not even realizing it. And it's important. So I think these are topics that need to be talked about. I'm just going to go ahead and welcome my guest to my show for the first time. She's in the Crypt for the first time, guys. Jaymee Jay. We did. I first learned about you, Jaymee, seeing the interviews that you did with Jonathan Wright, who is my co-host at Revolution Radio on Saturdays. We just had you on the past Saturday. Amazing interview, Jaymee. Lots of great stuff you talked about. And then I've been watching some of your other interviews. You've done quite a few, and they're all really great stuff. Like, you're really putting some great information out there, and I think it needs to be talked about. As I was saying, it's darker. Some people would consider it darker. I think it needs to be talked about even more than it is, and I'm glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect.
Great. Yeah, I was actually really excited that we're going to do a show covering all these topics on Lupercalia and what some people might call it Valentine's Day, but you
Yep.
should go and research where that comes from and what it really is and look at all the goat and dog sacrifices and werewolf rape and all that stuff that's associated with today. And also, I also want to talk today about how Valentine's Day is really a perfect example of mass mind control. So we can go into that a
Oh,
little bit too.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really good day for all these topics.
Well, yeah, we picked the best day, I think, to really tackle this because, like, we've talked a lot off air, too. And we really are looking at, like, you're really covering stuff that I've been wanting to talk to people about. And I've had I on my past shows I with other guests we kind of dabbled into pornography and like the whole dark aspect of it. We've kind of dabbled in it, but never really dove into it. And then when you were talking on Jonathan and I's show, we were kind of talking, and you showed a book on energy vampires, and that I was like, I have to talk to you about this because I was telling you off air I for years I've been around people at times where they just drain you. Like you could be in a great mood, you could feel amazing, and then even for me, some of these people I'm around for 15 or 20 minutes, and then you got to have a nap when they leave. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is weird. And then now the more I learn about it, this is a thing. There is people that feed off your energy, absolutely. So I like, wherever you want to start with this, I'm good. Like, what do you want to get into?
I think just because it's Lupercalia today, I think it'd be good just to talk about, kind of mass MK Ultra stuff that goes on these
Perfect.
holidays, where it's people call it traditions, but really what it is people just unconsciously doing behaviors that have been programmed into them repetitiously uh, in mass groups. And we see this on Valentine's Day, where you have your little triggers and anchors put out everywhere, all your little hearts and cupids and all this stuff. And, people it's pretty much do or die for guys. Like, I was even driving today back to my house and I saw, every guy's walking down the street with flowers. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like it didn't come from them organically being inspired to go and buy flowers. It was like there's been a message sent out to society today that if you don't go and do that, you're in trouble, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like you see all these guys like, you know, like I better go do this, you know, and it's kind of funny, like just seeing them all in a row at the grocery store, you know.
Getting flowers, and then I noticed too on TV. What I kind of have TV sometimes going in the background when I'm cleaning in the house and that. And I lately over the last 2 weeks, hardcore jewelry ads like diamonds, get
Yeah,
diamonds, hearts everywhere, and I'm thinking it's so true what you're saying. Like people just they automatically assume you got to get the flowers, the box of chocolates, the card, and this ritual. It's a ritual, is what
it
it
is a
is.
ritual. Yeah, it is a ritual. And another thing to look into if people want to go down a rabbit hole is looking into the De Boers family and the diamond industry and, you know, what blood diamonds are. And really, you know, the whole idea of making diamonds be related to marriage is, you know, that's actually something pretty new in history. And it was one of the greatest
Really?
marketing schemes ever created was to come up with the slogan that diamonds are forever and to make it pretty much obligatory that you would buy a diamond when you get married. Like it's, you know, that law was never written, you know, but like now it's, you know, I don't know anybody that goes and gets married without a diamond. Like they've done a really good job of that. So again, it's that mass mind control, right? Where people just unconsciously go and do a behavior and think it's from their own free will.
Absolutely, too. That yeah, I saw the movie Blood Diamond, and that's where I kind of really that was my first introduction into, I kind of heard things about blood diamonds and that, but that movie, I think, it's an older movie. It shows, I mean, like a part of it, like how they, how they get these diamonds and how there's a couple families that just kind of cornered it, and then they made this. And I'm really shocked that you said that. Like I thought, kind of diamonds would have went back a long time for
Mm-mm.
marriage, and this is like a new. You're saying this is
Yes.
pretty new.
Yeah. Yeah, and like diamonds is also a really good example because I mean diamonds have some utility for cutting glass and
Hmm.
things like that, but or being conductive or whatever. But I mean at the end of the day, they can make diamonds now, and I mean so the value is completely socially constructed, right? Like their diamonds are actually not worth money. Like they can make them quite easily now, and they
Yeah.
could be abundant, and you know, but because they've associated it with marriage, it has to be a month's salary to buy your engagement ring or you know again it's just a perfect example of this constructed false reality we live in. Diamonds is a really good example of that.
Absolutely. And what's crazy too, Jamie, is that guys think the bigger the diamond, the more that it shows they love the woman too, right? So let's get the biggest rock that you can possibly get, which, like you said, like you get in a high dollar value. Like it's
And they
crazy what.
never have resale value. I mean, go to
Yep.
any pawn shop, right? It's a
Yep.
graveyard. It looks like little tombstones, all the wedding
Yeah.
engagement rings in the pawn shop, right? It's
It's
like a
true
literal
too.
graveyard.
Yeah, you look at it. Yeah, that's fascinating how people just automatically assume that, like I said, you got to get a diamond and you got to get an engagement ring and then you got to get the biggest one you can afford. And it's really, it's crazy how people get kind of bought it, like buy into the whole programming. But they've done, like you said, they've done a good job of
Hmm.
really hammering that. And like I say, the last 2 weeks, that's all I've been hearing, like on ads everywhere, like on the internet and stuff. It's all Valentine's Day. They're just hammering it.
Yeah.
Wow, very fascinating. And what it like? Can you give people? Because I'd like to even know, like, what is the history behind Valentine's Day? Like, the real. What's the truth?
So Lupercalia is you know, it's just a Roman pagan festival. And so of course, like the Catholic, we all know the Catholic Church just you know, included all of the normally celebrated pagan festivities into the Roman Catholic Church culture and like renamed it. And then they
Mm-hmm.
have like Saint Valentine's and stuff. So that's kind of their way of like, you know, covering up how they took the pagan religions into the church. But Lupercalia in particular, you know, I'm not cutting down pagan rituals in general. I just think people should know what they're celebrating and instead of unconsciously going and doing it. Like
Right.
I tried to do a show about Christmas too, but we actually didn't end up recording it properly because it's Christmas is another really good example of this, right?
Exactly.
Where people just don't know what they're participating in. And I believe people should have free will to participate in whatever they want. It's just that when they do it for, they should just know what they're doing. That's kind of what I think, right? So, with Valentine's Day in particular, it's actually a pretty kind of a werewolf festival. Actually, is
Really.
Lupercalia, and it's a fertility rites. And there's they sacrifice dogs, sacrifice goats. They do kind of like whipping and like bobbing for apples to see who's gonna gang rape who, and it's a pretty
Wow.
nasty. Like I would be that's pretty safe to say it's a pretty satanic holiday actually. Um, Out of all the pagan holidays, it's actually probably one of the most kind of
It sounds,
werewolf
yeah, like,
centered rituals. Yeah.
wow. And so
Yeah.
when did they, like, you probably don't know exactly, but your research, when did it start becoming about hearts and diamonds, and like was
I
that?
think when the Catholic Church just decided, like they pretty much whitewashed all of the pagan festivals into a socially acceptable Catholic version. So if you could just probably Google Saint Valentine's
Right.
it right now and just sort of see when they actually did that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I got all my screens full. But I will check that.
yeah,
I will check that afterwards, and then I'll leave a link in the description, guys, on if I can find something that just describes what we're talking about, like a little quick.
and then again, like our I mean, and I could do a whole show on Christmas, but I won't even go down there right now. But like, the thing with a lot of these holidays is that they're really merging of multiple different things, right? So you look at any of the holidays like Christmas or Easter or Valentine's, or I mean, there's whatever, whichever one, right? Like there's the kind of church religious version, and then there's the pagan version, but then there's this other twisted stuff too, like that gets mixed in, whether it's like Santa Claus or with Valentine's Day it's Cupid, and like so even that's another level of kind of creepiness,
Mm-hmm.
because what's this interdimensional being that's love biting people, right? Like it's like, what is Cupid? Who is he? Is he like a little demon? like,
Right.
so it's like, how is this twisted into these like supposedly religious holidays as well, right? Like it's really a real twisting together of multiple different kind of versions of this story that people sort of go and think, oh, I'm just going down and buying some flowers, but it's like, you know
Yeah, and it's fascinating too because like Easter is another one. Like when I was younger, I was like, why rabbits? Like where did this whole? And I remember
yeah.
asking my parents that too. Like why? Like I was so curious. I was always asking questions. I'm sure I drove my parents crazy, and I probably drive people crazy now because I love to learn things and get knowledge as much as I can. And I was used to always ask like my mom like why rabbits and where did the hunting for eggs come from and chocolate? Like there was definitely like you said it was based on something a lot more ancient, and they've twisted it once again into something that is more socially acceptable. And I wonder how many people actually sit down and really think of the origins of any of this. Valentine's Day, Easter, like you said, Christmas is a big one. I'd love to talk to you about that on another show because that one I did
Yeah,
dive
Christmas
into, and I
is a
was like,
really big.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, me and Shane Jones actually we recorded a Christmas show and we didn't record it properly, so it didn't end up getting released, but we really kind of went over it all too because there's so much there. And it's all these, like, really what it is just people being unconscious, right? And
Hmm.
I think that holidays are just a really perfect example of mind control, because it's like how it's been repeated over time from generation to generation, right? So like nobody actually thinks about why they're doing something. Like they just do it because their parents taught them to do it, or
Right.
they, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
so everyone goes and gets a Christmas tree, or everybody goes and buys flowers on Valentine's Day, or like it's like it's so unconscious behavior, and it's actually considered like unacceptable not to participate, right? Like there's something
Yeah.
wrong with you if you don't go and hang up Christmas lights, or you don't go and buy flowers on Valentine's Day, or it's just such a perfect example of mass mind control being replicated intergenerationally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like what your family teaches you, and then we could get into a whole like what you're just talking about, what we learn growing up, and how families just pass traditions on to each other, and then after a while, you don't even know why you're doing it. It's just well, my family did it, and they did it before that, and it's so true, and that's what I was saying. How many people put thought into what they're even doing, or why they're celebrating it, or the meaning behind it, and I truly believe that yeah, okay, they may have put a light spend on Valentine's Day and Easter and all of these holidays, but the fact that there's so many people in the world at this moment participating in it is giving power to the true meaning of it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
still that
yeah.
energy that it just disguised as something good.
Yeah, and humans, we're transceivers, right? So we absorb energy and we give off energy, and we affect everything collectively on a quantum level, right? So, something that dark occultists love is getting people to go and celebrate their holidays while they're doing actual real rituals, and everybody else is just out going and, having drinks on Canada Day or whatever. But like that energy is actually still being harnessed because our energy is we're not deliberately focusing it on anything, we're just generating it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's really dangerous, not to be conscious of where your energy is going if you're just generating it. So they are being intentional with where they're focusing their energy, and then if you're just passively generating energy, they can harness yours as well, right? And we see this even on 420, is Hitler's
Yeah.
birthday, but like people think, oh, we're just gonna go party or whatever, right? But it's like, who's giving you these dates, and who's providing these opportunities for festivities on these specific dates, like especially when there's a whole group of humans at like a festival, or like Canada Day or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where people are just all feeding off each other and generating contagion and more energy, right?
That makes total sense. And I think of all the festivals that you talk about, like how much energy is being generated. Like when I think of any big festival, I think of Burning Man or all of the, and
Mm.
sometimes they're very blatant about what you're actually putting your energy into. They're to the point now, I think, Jamie, where they're not even really hiding it. But I just think of all of those hundreds of thousands of people generating that energy. And then it's great that we're going to be talking about energy vampires because I think this all kind of ties in, like where we're starting.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that those festivals, a lot of them are created specifically to harness energy,
Mm-hmm.
like even interdimensionally. Like even like they'll have a lot of these festivals on ley lines or sacred grounds, or where there's like energy centers and portals, stuff like that. Like they'll specifically go and have these things in those areas specifically for that reason. And then you look at a lot of people that get into this kind of like festival culture and stuff. And like a lot of them end up in a really vampired state after, right? Like they're,
Mm-hmm.
heavily into addiction or like depression or like just, all these, like they really have been vampired, whether they're conscious of it or not.
Mm-hmm. Very true, and I'm glad that we're going to be talking about that because I was like you showed me a book that you were reading about energy vampires. There you go, and I already ordered that book.
Yeah, it looks a little fuzzy, but
Yeah,
this one is really, I don't know why it's so
it's
fuzzy.
just it's I think it might be the camera setting, but if you move it to the middle,
It's called Psychic
on the way, there we
Vampires.
go, and it'll come, and then there you go. It should focus in somewhere around here. Oh, it's coming. It's trying. All right, well, I'll put a link for it. Okay, so yeah.
So this one is really interesting because a lot of the books that I read on energy vampires are kind of more about interdimensional beings and stuff, like, so they're maybe like a little bit more new agey kind of books. But then also I have a psychology background, so I mean, to me, I've studied a lot about like psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists and people that are really vampiring interpersonal
Mm-hmm.
relationships. So to me, that's very, very connected. And then also, like, people can be possessed, and then like you could be dating a possessed person that appears to be a psychopath, but there's actually like an entity harvesting your energy through that person. And
Wow.
so that's kind of the books that I've read mostly on it in my experience, like books on spiritual warfare and stuff. But then this book's really interesting because this guy has a PhD, and I believe he's a clinical psychologist, but he had access to like acrylic photography and stuff. So his work is very much according to the scientific method for trying to actually look at actual energetic transfers between people vampiring.
Mm-hmm.
Like he tried to basically like do empirical evidence based research on it,
Okay.
which is kind of different than a lot of the other books on it.
It's definitely
So
a
he
different look at it,
basically,
right?
yeah, he
Yeah.
basically took a bunch of photographs of people like before and after being like aura photographs with
Mm-hmm.
Kirlian photography, like actual energy photographs, right? And so he could actually show like the difference in people's auras before and after being vampired, and then also people that are vampires have a different, like they have very restricted auras. So one of the
Interesting.
findings in his book, and I'm not quite finished this one yet, but basically what he found is that people who are vampires have very restricted auras, so like they really don't give off a lot of energy, and then they actually could photograph like tendrils or like octopus tentacles kind
Mm-hmm.
of coming off of these people. Like they could literally photograph that. And it's funny because we've always kind of conceptualized vampires as kind of having octopus
Yep.
tentacles that hook into you, and but they actually could photograph it, showing that. And
It kind of reminds me of David Icke. I've seen a lot of his presentations and read a few of his books, and he talks about how these energy, like these beings, interdimensional, kind of lock into your chakra. They kind of like, he said in there. I think that's pretty much, I think, what we're talking about. How they're draining your energy, and they kind of
mhm.
hook into you. So yeah, continue. That's what just came up when you were saying that. Oh no, this may happen, guys. Once in a while here that Skype is doing its thing here, but that's okay. We're going to continue this. I will just call her back and we're going to continue. We're having a great interview here talking about a lot of important topics here, and we're going to be covering a lot of topics here. So please stick with me, guys. We are going to be we're going to get through this because this is information that needs to get out there. And I'm currently right now, while we're waiting to get Jaymee back on here. Oh, we got her back.
Okay.
All right, no problem there. I'm just chatting away, and I'm just letting people know here, Jaymee. I'm just going to show them that I am too. I'm just letting people know I'm reading the Satanic Bible, so I will put that up in the camera and show you guys. And I'm sure people are like, "Oh my God!" But definitely, I will get your opinions on this. This is kind of like my first really dive into it. I wanted to know the gameplay that we talk about. So many people in this movement talk about the satanic movement, like what the satanic people that are running the world, the mindset, and all of that. And I figured the only way I'm going to learn about this is actually reading about it and researching it. I want to go ahead and get you back on here. There we go. Back in color, we got Jaymee Jay here, and we are talking right now about energy vampires. So continue, Jaymee, and what we were
Um,
talking about. We left off with David Icke, and I was letting you know that I've heard him talk about how they kind of lock in your lower chakra and feed off of you.
can you hear me?
I perfectly can. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, like a lot of so there's different types of entities that it can attack and attach in different places.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was really interesting about this particular book, because he was taking the photographs, was just showing basically that there is like actual auras around people that
Right.
are actually showing this transfer of energy. And so in the universe, energy always equalizes, right? But it always goes from the high to the low. So that's why if you're a high energy person and you go somewhere, like you're going to get depleted, where the lower person will take on your energy, right?
Right.
So you'll both be even in the end, but like the higher one usually goes to the lower. Like that's just kind of how it works in nature. So yeah, this book is really interesting. I'm almost at the end of it, but another little interesting fact out of here is that he could take your right index finger and just take a Kirlian photograph of your finger, and it would be a little micro picture of your big aura.
Wow.
Kind of like blood analysis, like where they can take one drop of
Mm-hmm.
blood and it's like a blueprint for the macro of your body. So he could do that with just taking the fingerprint of somebody on the Kirlian photography. He could read their aura from one finger, and I just thought that was really interesting with biometrics and like even iPhones having your fingerprint, because I was like, it's almost like they could tell where you're at spiritually by taking a reading of your finger, right? Which I
That makes
found kind
sense.
of really interesting out of the research in this book as well.
Or collecting auras, maybe. As funny as that sounds, I mean, but collecting your aura, like, or a sample of your aura,
Yeah,
perhaps.
like reading it, right? And knowing, like kind of where you're at, right? Like, I mean, it's like, because we can all put on a persona to hide who we really are, but if they can actually read your aura, like you can't really lie, right?
That's so true. Fascinating. Yeah, and it just I remember like when you first showed that book, and I was just like I'm glad that you did, and it inspired me to really want to do this interview with you because I've experienced energy vampires firsthand. I think we all have if you're in tune at all with who your body. I mean, I'm sure people listening and watching right now know people or have been around people where you're just depleted. And you're not even around them very long. So there's definitely an energy draining going on. And what I wanted to ask you, Jaymee, is was this around, like, as everybody thinks of a vampire, they think of the Hollywood version, drinking blood, like the whole Bram Stoker's Dracula and all of these. This was definitely. Do you think this is what those stories were inspired from? Was first it was the energy vampires, and they've just kind of Hollywoodized it?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, but it's kind of both because now we're seeing that there really are people that actually are blood drinking vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I mean, I believe they've been around forever. And so maybe we kind of just had the concept of energy vampire, and then we sort of gave an image to that in the Hollywood version. But it's like, that's also a reflection of something that's really real and actually happening as well. So it's like kind of just maybe came into the consciousness and then was reflected through media.
Right.
But yeah, and then now it's like there's a lot of vampire culture, right? Like
Absolutely, yeah.
like real vampire culture. Like there is blood drinking cults. There's like dating. There's vampire dating, like where people do drink each other's blood and like have relationships based on blood drinking, which is highly addictive. Like there's recovery groups for vampires, and that sounds really weird, but yeah, there is actually real vampire culture. It's kind of in the underground, but not really anymore. Like there really are groups of people that do live as vampires.
Wow, so there is definitely something going now. From your research, is there something? What is it about the? Like, I'm assuming the reason for the blood drinking is they're going after your life force. Is that what this is all about? When you really get down to the root of it?
And it's consent too. Like blood is, like really, blood is your DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which God, this could go so many directions, but I mean, yeah. So it's also a form of slavery, and consent to slavery is to let somebody drink your blood or have your blood, right? And then once somebody has your blood, they can do a lot quantumly to you, right? With
Sense.
a
Yeah.
sample of your blood. So once you give over your blood, it's like that's kind of a legal thing that you're doing on one level. So people that have relationships, like they'll be willing victims for vampire relationships, like where people will give so much blood weekly, like in a contract.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's kind of disturbing. Like that, like I'm just thinking about it, and I mean, because I'm a lot of people. It's true when you think of vampires. Hollywood's done a great job, Jaymee, of programming people with all these topics, with Satanism, and with all religion. They've done this. They've made it they've inverted it. So now when people hear vampires, they automatically, I don't care who you are, going to think about Dracula. That's kind of where your brain goes. Just like when you think of the devil, you think of a little red dude with a pitchfork. And they've done their job well, and that's why I want to get away from that and get into what we're talking about, the real things. And so, energy vampires, and then talking about it makes sense. You're giving up. That's like the most personal thing you could give somebody. Really, is your blood. I mean, that's everything that you are in a way, like in a code kind of way.
Yeah, it's your code. It's your signature. It's you. Like it's what makes you you.
Wow. So it's a lot of power. It's a lot of giving up your power and taking power, and I see what they're doing.
Yeah, and so I mean now there's just a lot of symbology with everything that's gone on in the last 2 years with like giving of blood and taking of blood and giving DNA and like DNA samples and like even the tests and like I mean so there is a transfer of blood and then depending on what people believe is in the injection, it can be a changing of DNA, which is like you've basically consented to like your signature being modified and stuff. So, I mean, there's so many multi-layered things going on than just going and getting something into your bloodstream. But yeah, and then you can kind of look at vampirism, like even like our governments are vampires, right? Like they are living off the exploitation of people's labor and then paying themselves to be the people who dole out a percentage back of our labor to
Mm-hmm.
us in the form of services that
It's true.
they like. So, but then they're sustaining themselves by doing that. So it's like a vampiric relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And then you can look at, you know, there's so many relationships that are parasitic, right? Like even most corporations, like the CEO is making all the money and you're the ones doing the work, and then they're like living off the exploits of your labor. Or another good example is like high rises, right? So you see these high rises that literally look like batteries
Mm-hmm.
with people living in them, and each person's paying so much for that condo, and then the person that owns it's like living in the penthouse on the top, and just it's like all that energy is being harvested up, you know.
Wow.
So
It's
we see
true.
this, it's symbolized in all of the architecture around us and stuff. Like there's always been parasites and vampirism in our dimension, in our society, right? And right now it's like that's one of the main things I think we need to realize about you know, the controllers right now, is that they are vampires, right? And they're kind of being exposed. And I always say like the Achilles heel of a vampire is that they need our blood and they
Mm-hmm.
need a supply, right? Whether that's like a psychopath or a narcissist or a pedophile, even like they are like vampiring the life force off of people. So if we like, they can't really live without us, right? Because they need us to live, right?
Right.
So it's like that is their weakness. They can't just go and do their own thing without us. It's like they only exist if we allow ourselves to have our blood drinking from them.
Mm-hmm. Same with energy, I would say too. They need, if they're, even if like, we're talking about blood drinking, obviously, but I'm also thinking of energy too. That if they couldn't exist without us giving them their energy. Now, my question for you and is, and I truly want to get your advice on this. How do you protect yourself against somebody who's an energy vampire and is feeding off you? Because I wonder if they even realize they're doing it. A lot of people, I don't even think they realize they are one. And then but when you're around people like that, is it best to stay away from them, or is there a way you can protect yourself? Like, I'm just really curious about that.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends where you're at too. Like, if you're at a place where you're not feeling confident or strong, I mean, you shouldn't go work as a social worker or
Right.
something, where you're going to be around like really people that are like really prone to being vampires, right? Like, if you're, and I've worked in that area for a long time, so I feel like I have pretty good skills that I've learned really the
Right.
hard way, in being aware of that and knowing when it's happening and being able to like set boundaries and like just even awareness of that's always a potential for any type of that's being in any of those scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I think like, yeah, if you can avoid that, then that's probably your best bet, is to avoid being around people like that. However, like there is certain occupations and stuff where you're going to be
Right.
around that. You're going to have to develop skills to navigate it.
Could be a
Um,
family member too. I'm thinking of family
yeah,
members.
it might be
How do you
somebody you
avoid them?
have to interact with, right?
Yeah.
So once you have to interact with them, like awareness is number one, right? Like if you're aware, and I really love what you said about just feeling tired, because a lot of times, and we're socialized all through school to not be in tune with our intuition, right? Like we got to ask permission to go to the washroom. We got to eat when it's lunchtime, even if we're hungry or not. Like you got to sit in the desk when you're tired, and then
Mm-hmm.
you got to go do PT when you're like, it's never like, what do I feel like doing now? Being in tune with yourself. It's always being told from the outside what you're doing now, right? And that's very intentional to disconnect people from just being aware of themselves. Like you're always forcing yourself to go to work or forcing yourself to go
Mm-hmm.
to the gym or like, you know what I mean?
It's true.
And so with energy vampiring, a lot of times there is just that physical feeling there, even though the person might have seemed like so nice and even helpful. Like even some counselors are energy vampires. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're hooking you in to like need them for counseling, and like they're getting actual supply off of you, even though they seem like they're there to help you, right? And so that could be with a doctor, or like all these helping professions can seem like they're there to help you, but like they're actually vampiring you. So you can't always trust your eyes or how somebody looks on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
because most highly evolved predators know how to hide it, right? So that's kind of the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. Is like a sociopath has enough self-control to hide the fact that they're a psychopath. So
Mm-hmm.
they can camouflage themselves. So those ones are going to be a little bit harder. And the only way you really are going to really be aware of it is to really be in tune with your body. Like really notice, hey, do I have a migraine after hanging out with that person? Do
Yeah.
I feel exhausted? Can I just not even think straight after being with that person? Because my brain's all foggy and, you know.
That's how you know, and I know people like that in my life currently. Where I was telling you off air that 15 minutes with them, and I could have just got up in the morning and feeling amazing, and then for some reason they'll come over and talk to me or something, or they'll come and visit, and then after 20 minutes. I'm like, I gotta go lay down, and I'm really aware of it. When you know what's happening, and then you become aware of it, you're like, wow. And then I can even feel it when I'm out in public. Like I could be just waiting in a
Yeah.
line somewhere, and then it's like somebody is draining me. And I'm sure most people, and what do you think, Jaymee? Like, they probably don't even realize they're doing it, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people are even aware of it, or are they? Do you think?
Well, from what I've been reading lately, kind of it seems like people start out doing it unconsciously, but then when they start to realize it's working, then they kind of start developing these maladaptive behaviors to be able to master getting it from people. Like they can pick people who are more easily vampired, and they start to sort of develop these skills to get their supply easier. Whereas like it did start out kind of unconsciously. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it is because they've, been abused as a child or been through trauma or like, weren't had their needs met developmentally. And so they kind of have this like hole inside of them that they start to, as a survival mechanism, they start to figure out ways to sort of fill this hole. Right. But it's every time that they vampire off someone else, it's like an addict, right? Like it just keeps them addicted to needing it from the outside, and they're never actually generating it from the inside. So they get very dependent on other people for their energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it leaves them in a very deficient place. And so like, a lot of them will just develop these skills of like how to get supply fast. And, you can see this, like people do it in dating and they do it in,
I was gonna say social media has got to be a energy vampire's like wet dream. To be honest, like they can just go in the
yes.
chat rooms and just, even if it's negative energy, they don't care. They're just getting that energy.
Yes, I think that's a really good point too, is that energy is energy and they don't care if it's negative or positive. And so like, especially with online trolls, like they love any reaction they're getting, right? Because it's like they amplify it and then they drain it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
Interesting, because you see a lot of that on social media. I mean, troll,
yeah,
and they just, they'll just go into a chat room or comment on something just to get a reaction. Like that's what they
instigating.
want. Yeah, they instigate it, and then when they get called out on it, then they act all innocent. Like I don't know what you're talking about, but it's bad social media. So I'm glad that we're kind of even touching on that, because that is a topic I've covered a lot, Jaymee. Is social media. I see what it's doing to children, how parents are letting these devices babysit and raise their kids, because and I know people that from the time that their child's awake till they go to bed, they've got a device in their hand. They got a phone, a tablet. They're on, and
And
I'm
it's
just
being vampired to those corporations. Like Facebook
absolutely.
is recording all of that information into AI algorithmic machines that are like using that for machine learning in order to like harvest
Hmm.
our data. But like a lot of the data that people put onto social media is emotional, right? Because machines are trying to learn human emotion, because that's the hardest thing for
Right.
like interdimensionals or sociopaths to understand, the subtlety of emotion. Like it's like a foreign language to them. So for things like Facebook and stuff, like where we're putting the check mark or the like or the happy emoji, or we're either getting mad at something or we're agreeing with it.
Hmm.
So every time we comment or put an emotion to it, it's like that's what the machine really wants, is to know how you feel, because then it's recording all that so it can start to like understand feeling on a quantum level, like
Wow.
quantitatively. That's really why they don't really care what you're doing on there, as long as you're on there commenting on stuff, right?
So just keep commenting and doing your little emojis and all of that, and it looks, everybody thinks, oh, it's just cute and it's convenient, but there's what, like, once again, there's a dark side to this. They're doing this for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Wow.
it's vampiric, right? Like it's vampiric. It's keeping you. It's your energy. Like how much energy do people put online? Like
Oh my God, yeah. Wow.
you know,
Tons. Some people live on online, like, and then that would bring me, because we're kind of talking about the dating, like we've talked, like we were talking about the dating and that, and I'm just letting people know, like, I mean, because I've been married, I'm not part of the dating scene, but I have friends that are single, and they're
Yeah.
in the dating scene, and I want to get into that because it's going to really tie into what we're talking about this energy vampires and vampires in general.
Right.
Like, I
So the
want to get
dating
your
sites
thoughts.
are
Yeah.
also
I
the
want to
dating
get your
sites are
thoughts.
like owned by some of the same companies that are also harvesting your data about dating trends and like stuff, right? So you're just feeding that information gathering off of you. But then you'll notice now that so like narcissism has been promoted so heavily in our society that the more narcissistic somebody is, the more of a vampire they are, right? Because a narcissist needs supply and they're not actually generating anything. Like you actually generate love by giving love,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
if you try to get love, the more you try to get it, the more deficient you actually are and you become more of a vampire. Like if you really want love, you have to give more love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been inverted and everybody's been kind of primed. Even our generation, I know you're like a little bit older than me, but basically they really started this self-esteem movement in the late 70s, early 80s, where they were like, giving everyone a gold star and just encouraging and,
Mm-hmm.
like just really pumping up self-esteem in people. And, kind of the follow to that was like a generations of narcissism and a lot of like in order to get self-esteem, a lot of people actually like it created more bullying and stuff too because people were kind of like putting other people down because they needed to be esteemed
Right.
higher so that
Right.
they needed the differentiation, which they're kind of trying to get away from now. But then they have this other inverted version of self-love and love yourself, and which is just another form of narcissism that they're promoting, right? Because
Yep.
narcissism is a really deficient place to be at. So with dating, now that everybody's got this like narcissism going on, people are just it's like mutual vampiring online, right? So like I heard one person saying that online dating is just like a bunch of losers cross pollinating, right? Like it's nobody's really like everybody's just like trying to get and nobody's trying to give, but they like temporarily just like little bees, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
and then they move on to the next flower, and it's like they're just cross pollinating their dysfunction, right? So that was a good analogy for that.
That's actually a perfect analogy. Actually, now that I think about it,
Yeah.
because I mean, I was telling you off air, like before we started doing the interview. If I had to go into the dating scene now, it'd be a nightmare. I wouldn't even know where to start, nor would I
No.
want to, because like we have to get into what they're doing and causing. Like this is something, and it's so hard to put into words for me, but I see what it's doing. Then there's definitely an agenda behind it where they're destroying. To me, they're destroying love. They're destroying the relationships. They're destroying the family. They are really going hard at that. And when I see friends of mine that are on these dating apps, and it's just swipe, like as I was saying at the very beginning in my intro, when I was dating, there was a process. There, like you met somebody usually through friends, or somehow you met somebody, and then you got to know them a bit, and then you kind of hung out, and then you liked each other. And I don't have to go through the whole dating thing, but maybe I do in this show. Who knows? But
It's
there
like
was
an ancient scripture
yeah, it's
you're
like
talking to
ancient
the young people
scrolls.
now.
Yeah, it's like ancient scrolls how to date, but there was a process, and now it's so this is so unnatural. It's not the way things are. It's almost like they've once again inverted it, because now you have people just in this hookup culture where they're swiping left or right who they like. They meet online, and then they usually hook up, and then it's what is going on, Jaymee? You got to break this down, because this has to end in disaster.
Yeah, I mean it is just it's a satanic inversion and it's a satanic algorithm, right? Like so it's not based on what would actually make people compatible.
Hmm.
So they're basically because and again everybody lies on their profiles anyway. So it's like even if they were using the algorithm based on people inputting data, like there's so much deception that that's useless, right? So really what it is just looks, right? So everybody's just basing on looks. And of course we can kind of look at the reality of there's a few people that are really good looking. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and then there's some
Right.
people that really don't have looks at all, right? And sometimes those people find each other, and it's great. Like it
It's
doesn't.
true.
It's being good looking doesn't mean you actually have a better chance of finding a partner. Actually, it's almost like less,
I
right?
was gonna
Because
say that.
they have so many options, right? And so, but there's always this illusion, like all the girls are kind of going for these 10 guys at the top of the 100, right? And then those 10 guys, because they have all the women after them, just act like players and don't settle down with any of the women. And then, so it's kind of like, it's not really working for anybody, right? Like, and especially it doesn't work for the people in the middle, like, which is most people, right? Like most people are in the middle. They're not, you know, in the top 10 or the top bottom 10, like they're somewhere in the middle. But there's always this illusion that people are going to date up, right? So it's like this fake thing they're selling that everyone's chasing that doesn't really work out for anybody.
Right, and I have to, and I can't just say that, you know, that people don't get together and probably find true love on these apps. I mean, I don't want to go cover. I want to make sure I say that too, because I do know one couple that did meet on these apps and they've been dating forever and it worked. But in my defense, when I say that, they met on one of these apps, but they didn't rush it. They actually, after they met, they kind of did the dating thing like you're supposed to do after. So they didn't just kind of just hook up and then like, oh, let's start dating now after you've kind of like saw the end of the movie, and it's really weird. But
yeah, and that's like casinos, right? Like, of course, they have to have a winner once in a while, or nobody's going to play the game, right? So, I mean, like, you know,
it's very true. That's a great way to put it. You got to have a winner once in a while. But how many our lives are destroyed from these apps? And I think of online too. I know people in my life that even online is just like Facebook and these other things are destroyed. They destroyed marriages. It's like I really see the satanic agenda behind it, so I really want to talk about that. I just think it's a really unnatural way to do things. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, people are really being programmed. Like, I always think about rap music, right? And how, you know, it's just a bunch of white men record executives that are like, how can we like destroy Black people's communities, right? Like, and they go and they put out all like, you know, hire all these rappers to put out songs about how cool it is to be a murderer, go to jail, be a drug dealer. All women are hoes. Don't raise your kids. Knock up as many women as possible. Don't raise them. Like, but that makes you a man, and like you're cool, player, and you got a big necklace, and like, right, like, and so it's just like that was such a perfect example of somebody being programmed, like where it's actually like cool to go to jail. Like that's crazy, right? It's not actually, it's gonna suck and it's not cool, right? Like, but that's how they build their jails, right? Like the same people are getting kickbacks from the jails that are putting out the record executives for these albums, right? Like it's just a mind control they did on a mass level to that population, right? And you see this now, like where they're really promoting just not just promiscuity, but like it's like being in a relationship is considered a prison sentence, right? Like where it's like, who would want that? Who would want like a loving relationship with your best friend and have intimacy and like a solid relationship where somebody had your back and you knew them really well and you trusted them and, you know, it's you two against the world. Like, who wants that? You know, that's just like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. Like what you really want is to just have multiple superficial interactions with multiple people, right? Like that's what's put on this pinnacle now. And like, it's really appealing, right? Like at first it's like, oh, a whole candy shop full of different kinds of candy, right? You're going to go try all the different candy. But, you know, it's like, at the end of the day, you're just going to get sick of eating candy, right? And you're going to want something good, right?
Exactly.
Like you don't eat candy for so long before you're like, this is gross, right? Like, and you see that happen to people. Like they kind of go through this phase and then they're like, oh, it was, in the end, they're just so sick of it. They're like, all I want is to like stop dating and find one person and not even be in this game anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. And also I'm glad you kind of touched on that. That's great because it was going to, now that I've taught, and I've been researching this too. Now there's groups, and I first saw it with men, and there is an acronym for it where
the men going their own way or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. Like I mean, when you start looking into that, and then I looked deeper, and there's women in that same kind of camp where they've had such a horrible experience with dating and online dating that to the point now where they don't even want to date. They're like, I'm done. I don't need anyone, and that's also not good.
Yeah, I think it just people are just it's so traumatic, like at this point, like what it's become, right? Like it's like a cage match or something. Like it's just not even like, it becomes so distorted. Like, you know, I don't think anybody goes on to dating websites and stuff and doesn't get traumatized, like men or women or really good looking people. Like, I mean, you might think you're good looking and then someone's going to not message you back. And those people are probably going to take it the hardest, right? Because they're used to not being rejected. And until they meet their match, or you know what I mean? So it's like everybody's kind of going through like rejection and just lack of respect, right? Like, because it's like anonymous. Like people are like, why would I even show respect to somebody I'll never see again? That's just how cities are too, right? People become more sociopathic the bigger city you live in, and so online's just like amplified that so much, right? And then so it's like, so they've destroyed relationships through these dating apps, and then but then they provide porn as the surrogate
Yes.
to fill this deep loneliness that men actually have, right? Like, I mean, yeah, men are wired a little bit more physically, but like they also want companionship and like intimacy, and like
Yep.
a girlfriend they actually love is not like, of course they want that too, right? And so, but because it's so detrimental to that even happening with the way that the culture is now, it's like, so then they just provide this surrogate of the pornography that is to fill that void. And then again, it's just a vicious cycle of, the more you go into that, the less you're ever going to come out of it.
Exactly. I'm glad that we're going to be touching on this, and it's it's an uncomfortable topic, but I'm having it with you, and that's fine. I think it needs to be talked about even more, this pornography that's going on, because there's
Yeah.
definitely a dark side. There's consequences to this, and I knew something, Jaymee, when COVID started, and then they announced like Pornhub, it's all free, and I'm like, wait. Then I was like, wow, they are really going for it now, and so I want to dive into that with you about this pornography, and because I went on there, and I grew up, as I was telling you off a couple days ago, I grew up with, you got a magazine that your dad had hidden somewhere, and if you Playboy, and if you really wanted to get hardcore back then, it was Hustler, and you might
Yeah,
have to go
Hustler was
rent
a
it.
big part of history, actually.
Yeah,
That Hustler really changed things. Like that was a really
absolutely.
actually certain point where things actually started to change was with Hustler
Wow.
particularly.
Okay. Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that. And then I remember I was telling you too that you'd have to go and rent like a shitty DVD, or not even a DVD, a shitty VHS or beta tape of porn, and it was just god awful. And yeah, see, you know what I'm talking about. It was
No, you know
awful.
what's so funny is like the kids now, when when our grandparents tell us about like having to like use a rotary phone or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
like you're gonna be like, back in my day we had to go into a secret room in the video store
You
in a
did,
small
behind
town
a
where you know
curtain.
the person who works there anyways, get your two VHS tapes, put your porn in between, and walk up to the counter and like slide it all, like,
Slide it all
and
as
like
one
the guy
bunch.
just pretends that he's not looking at what you rented. Like, it's so funny, the secret room of porn. Like, I can't believe that is even had to happen in history.
It did. Yeah, where my
And
video
people
store was
still
like
did
behind
it.
a
They didn't
curtain.
care.
Yeah, they still did it. Yeah, and you're right. You'd hide it behind two movies. You'd kind of sandwich them together, and you'd be like, okay, then. Oh, I remember that. I imagine some people listening are going, "What? Beta? What the hell is beta? What are they talking about? Beta? Beta, guys, was a little shitty tape that came before VHS. Believe it or not.
Oh man,
And
it's
I
so
know you
funny that people
remember.
had to go get porn from a store. Like,
I
that is
know, but
just so horrible.
it was, but my point, Jaymee, is that these magazines, okay, you're looking at photographs, and then you can rent these crappy, you had to go out of your way to rent one of these crappy movies. Now, what scares me is how easy, I mean, there's like, you can go on Google right now and type in Pornhub, and you can go right in. It's not like you got to go through 50 channels and go through,
Yeah.
anybody can get on this. And
Yeah, and I
it
mean,
blew my
it's
mind when I looked at it. I was like, whoa, it's worse than I ever thought.
yeah, I actually, like I said, I really underestimated it as well. Like, because I just wasn't really paying attention. Like, I was like, oh yeah, porn on, of
Right.
course it's on the internet, but I didn't really understand how much the internet changed porn, and how much that internet changing porn actually changed all of our social relationships, and it is going to actually change a whole generation of people after us. Like, where are the people who are like 10, 11, 12 right now? Where are they going to be by the time they're 30? Like, I'm pretty sure everybody's going to be impotent because of
That's a
watching
problem.
porn when they're like
Yep.
a teenager, and then their brain's going to wire that way, and everybody's going to be in like some infantile state of like impotence of like I don't know what's going to happen from the fallout of this, but I don't think it's good at all.
I agree. I agree. And I want to talk about the dark side of it, because there truly is a dark side to it.
Well, it's
And
harvesting your energy too, right?
absolutely, that's
It
why I
is
brought it up. Yep.
vampiring remotely.
Yep. And I just think of the energy that people are putting into that. And as you said, you bring up a great point that there's already a problem in the whole dating and trying to, go about that process of doing dating in the proper way. Then you throw into the mix endless porn. Oh, and we got a little bit of a seize up here. Not a problem. We will just go ahead and just as I reach out to Jaymee here, guys, I mean, hopefully you're sticking with us. This is a definitely it's a dark topic, but I think it's one that's got to be talked about. As I was saying earlier, it is very much something that has to be talked about because porn is huge like now, and the fact that it's free and you can find it so readily, it really, and then you can see what you can find on there. As I was saying, you had magazines when I was growing up. You went and found your dad's stash and it was in the basement somewhere, usually under the toolbox or something, and you had a couple magazines, or like we and Jaymee were saying, you had to go out of your way to go rent these pornographic movies, and which weren't even that bad, unless you really went searching for some dark stuff, but most of it was pretty light compared to what's now. Now when you go to these porn sites like Pornhub and that, woo, I tell you, there is some stuff going on there, and I really want to get into that. We're going to just go ahead and we're going to make sure I get Jaymee back on here because I'm going to keep diving into this. This is a topic that needs to be talked about. And we got them back. I told you I'd get Jaymee back here. Not a problem. When it freezes up, I just go to myself and give a recap of what we're talking about, Jaymee, so no worries.
Okay.
And then, just get yourself on camera when you're ready. And we will continue.
My camera's showing. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you and I can see you.
Okay.
You're rocking it. But yeah, we were just talking about, I was just giving a recap that we're diving now into the dark side of porn because this is having an effect on relationships, on men and women, on sexual problems. This is going to be a big topic, and I would love we can go wherever you want to start. And
well, I would also recommend that people go and watch my show with Shane Jones on Inquiry of Our Reality, because I think we covered a lot of this on that show, and I think it's worth it for people to go listen to that too, because we really covered a lot. But then to elaborate on that, and just for people to go on their own and look at the science, there's so much science showing the negative effects of porn. You're just lying to yourself if you think that's not going to happen to you. It's really textbook. If you keep watching it, it's going to rewire your brain a certain way, and then you're going to function a certain way. And it's an addiction. It's a drug. It works the same way in your brain as a drug. And once you kind of do the damage from porn, it's actually really hard to undo it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not going to be easy to go back. You're never going to go back to how you were before that. Your brain's already got new neural pathways, and you already have an addiction root. And the work you're going to have to do to have even any sense of normalcy is going to not be worth it for whatever pleasure you might have derived from going down that porn road.
Wow. So there's actually, there's something going on physically in the brain and everything, there's damage being done, even just looking at it.
Yeah, there's lots of research. Go do your research. There's all kinds of studies of process addiction, porn. The more you watch porn, you actually first you can't get off with a real woman, and then you actually get to a point where you can't even get off with the porn. So you're actually going to end up like an impotent person who can't even get off at all. It's going to take you to a really pathetic place if you take it to the end of the road.
Wow. That's kind of scary. And I think about it too. It probably starts off so innocent. I think a lot of people just I'm just going to watch a little bit. You start off watching probably normal stuff like couples or whatever your kink is, I guess. But I think over time, it's just, and from what I've heard, a lot of people say is that wears off very quickly. And then nobody starts off going to the deepest, darkest corners of porn, I don't think. I think it starts off normal. And then what's going on in the brain where you need more and more.
Yeah, it's really simple psychological desensitization, and it's extinction learning, right? So this happens in movies with violence, or a lot of times they pair violence and sex in movies and also in porn, because that's the same part of your reptilian brain. So what they're doing is making it so you actually need violence to become aroused, right? So they're doing that on mass mind control of people through movies. They've done it forever. It's really easy to do, especially for men. It's really part of their reptilian brain is violence and sex, right? So and food. Actually, those three things that are in there wired together. Yep. I kind of have a theory too. I think it's a little different for women, because I've always wondered why women go for bad boys, or whenever there's a serial killer, there's all these women in love with them. And I think that maybe danger is arousing for women, and that danger circuit kind of gets connected to like a sexual arousal in females like that. Whereas with men, I think it's more violence that can get paired with the sexuality. But
Okay.
that, I don't know, that's just a theory I kind of have that I'm looking into right now. But
I wanted to ask you that because is now we know that guys I talk, a lot of guys are addicted to porn. Now, from your research, what about women? Is it equal, or is there like are
it's getting
women
worse. It's getting
worse?
worse. So like I think some of the first wave feminists were really against pornography. Like there was a big when like and this is ties back to Hustler magazine and Larry Flint. And Larry Flint's, I mean, his own daughter said that he abused her and stuff. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
not just he's a really sick pig. Like he's not just some guy that made porn. Like he really is like not a good person.
Right.
If you're looking into like what his own kids said about him and stuff, you can look that up. But anyway, so like, those kind of feminists were really fighting against porn because they knew it wasn't good for marriages. And like, it wasn't just like going to be okay for this to come into the society. Right. And so they fought against it and stuff. And there's kind of this like, I mean, it's always been there, but like it was kept to a level and kept underground. Right. And so, but now, like with the internet and stuff, it's really been normalized. And so they're like, you can even look up psychology articles on the internet, and it's like just kind of making it really like they've medicalized it, right? Like, oh, it's just pornography. It's just a tool for, and there's like counselors recommending it. And it's like, they're really trying to like normalize pornography, which, so women, I think they really couldn't fight it. So they joined it. Right. And so they started using that too. And so now women, I think, are like, I don't think they're at the same level as men just because we're not wired the same way. But like there's like women are more wired to use like their whole brain. So it's not just the visual. Like men are, this is why porn's so dangerous for men, because they're very visually wired. Like that is something they're not going to be able to resist, that visual. Whereas like women they don't really have the same weakness. Like women have more of like a holistic approach to the brain. So like they need the story leading up to the events. They want to know like why these people are having sex, or like they want like the whole story. Or so a lot of women listen to like stuff like verbal stories, like
romance. I think a romance novel is huge.
Novels, stories on tape, reading things, or like a movie that's really well made in a context. Whereas men, it's just the visual like reptilian brain, right? And in nature, this sort of is supposed to complement each other and work itself out in the divine plan, but like it's been distorted, right? And so, yeah, women are like getting worse, and a lot of young women really are using pornography, and a lot of young women also use pornography because it's safer for them, right? So like, they can go and have a sexuality, a solo sexuality by themselves, and not have to put themselves at risk for harm or violence, right? So, like, because some of these women have had really bad experiences with these men or young boys who have watched pornography and then like done these horrific things to women, like young women at a party, right? Like back in the day, somebody at a bush party might go make out in the bush or whatever, right? But now it's like these men are trying to do like really hardcore porn stuff to these girls, and these girls kind of have a couple of experiences really young and are like, this isn't like something I'm interested in, right? So they'll just go into their own world with the pornography as like a safety way to, which is not healthy either, right? Like it's just all not good.
Yeah, all of it. And I'm glad that you're talking about it, because I don't hear like women talk about it, especially that often. So I'm really glad that you're willing to talk about it, because I love to get your, as a woman, I like
women
to hear.
It's really on the rise, like, and it's being promoted too. Like they've kind of like, they have specific porn for women, and where they've kind of buffered it, you know what I mean? Like where they'll put a storyline into it or whatever, like it's very female centered. And so they're just trying to pull women in too, because really the people that make porn, most of them are Satanists, and they know exactly what they're doing. And it is occult, and it is ritual, and it's has an agenda, and the agenda is to separate out so that people are not in relationships, that they're just an island to themselves, and they actually don't have the social skills to even interact with the opposite sex, right? And I can't remember the exact place, but in Japan, like they have whole societies of people that are not sexual anymore. Like they don't have sex. The males and females have no interest in each other. And it's through social engineering, but also through like chemicals in the food and stuff. Like they've really like killed that. And that's a
Wow.
perfect society, right? Is a bunch of little children, right? That are not evolved in that area. They're like just all kept like little kids, right? Like they
Hmm.
would like giggle if a guy tried to sit next to them on a bus. Like it's like, and they're like 40, right? Like it's like that's actually what they want. Um, and yeah, it's
Wow.
really weird. And then so some of those Japanimation um books, which I was shocked. I worked at a library once and I actually looked at some of those and I'm like, these are really pornographic. Like, and they have them for
Absolutely.
kids, right? Like, I had
Hmm.
no idea until I was putting one back on the shelf and I was like, wow, like, I don't think parents really know what's in these. Like, um, anyways,
That whole
but
anime thing for sure
yeah,
is,
the anime.
yeah.
And then in Japan, so it's really weird. Like, these women like read books of little gay boys together, but it's the women reading it. And there's like a whole culture of it, and
Wow.
that is their sexuality, is to read and like Japanimation of two boys even though they're a female. Like it's really weird. I don't know how they did that, but it's a really weird phenomena over there.
That's so true. And so what you're saying is that because men and women are definitely, the porn is doing something different in the brain of a man and a woman because we're wired different.
Yeah.
It's not the same. There's chemically something else. It's very different, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
And
women, I mean, sex is for bonding. Like women, after they orgasm, they get flooded with oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone, and so do men, right? But men can kind of override it, like especially if they don't cuddle after sex. Like if you stay and cuddle, you might fall in love with the girl because that's actually when you're gonna get your oxytocin, is in the cuddling after. Whereas if men like don't cuddle after, they can actually bypass that bonding part. I shouldn't even tell
really,
people.
that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
shouldn't even tell people this, but yeah, it's the cuddling that'll hook you actually, like that, like,
And then that
so
explains why women after sex like that. To them, that's almost more important than the sex, is that
right,
bonding before
because
and
that's the drug
after.
they get.
It's the
Yeah, they
before
get.
and after. And then I've talked to some women who, they will be really open and talk to me, and they'll say like, the sex is good, but they like the before and after, and I'm like, really? And then you hear guys, they're
Right.
all like, I just want to get off, like that, like
Yeah,
and that's just, I'm glad you're explaining that because I don't think people really think about that, how
yeah,
important
and I
that
mean that's
moment is.
okay, right? Like we were created as complementary opposites, right? And so there's this competition and there's this conflict between men and females where men are like, I just want to do it, and women are like, let's cuddle up, like like you got to be in a
Right.
relationship, and like, but it actually is designed that way to the conflict actually. If you can work the conflict out, there's something more created than what was there before the parts, right? And so a lot of what the Satanists are trying to do is to separate out the parts and for you to never have that like growth through the friction that would create growth in both of you, to have to compromise and work it out a little bit, like, right?
It
They want
makes
to keep
sense.
everything separated out. And so like when they take that to an extreme level, like in Japan, like where it's like people literally have, like, they're not even talking to each other anymore, like they're not interested, like they've killed the sexuality in these people. That keeps them in a very like infantile programmable state.
And I would explain why then they really throw the porn hard at the men, because they, as you were saying
Yeah,
earlier, if I understood right, when men are in that aroused state and if they're constantly exposed to it, they're kind of in their reptilian, their brain.
yeah.
So there's not really any high order thinking or conscious thinking going on. You're kind of just in this. You're just in the reptilian state. I don't know a better way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the reptilian state, you're really like, sandwich good. Like that's your, like you're not, that's the extent of your intelligence.
Right.
Like you're not like even planning ahead, or like you're just really in a like an animal state, right? And you see it's not just the pornography, but it's done everywhere. Like there's kind of like advertising for a man's razor or whiskey or whatever. Like it's always, a female in a car and a female in a motorcycle because it wants to activate that part in the brain for advertising. Like it's just, you're bombarded with it all the time
Mm-hmm.
in a really obvious way. But then even in non-obvious ways, like I could probably go into my cupboard right now and pull out any product that comes in a box and find there's a male female symbol on there, whether it's like an egg and something long, like they always have it on every box or package. Like there's always male female, just because they're always trying to activate that part of your brain, which is the survival part of your brain as well, right? So that's part of the mind control of keeping us in fear all the time, because fear puts you into your, activates your amygdala and
Mm-hmm.
your reptilian brain and your flight or fight and your survival mode. And then if they can like activate the fear with everything going on politically and then give you the porn at the same time. Like it's like, it's like being at one of those car auctions, right, where they got the two
Yeah.
people. Like
And your
that's really
brain's
what
just
they're
go
doing to men specifically right now.
and
Like
your
it's
brain's
not
just
good.
going, yeah, it's going crazy. Like your brain's in this state. It's definitely not a natural state, especially when you hear of people that spent like hours and hours on these porn sites and they're
Yeah, how
jerking
much
off.
money are they spending, right?
Oh,
Like you see guys that go to the strippers or whatever, and like, sure, whatever, it's probably gonna happen at a bachelor party, whatever. But like, these men, they go in and think, oh, I'll just have a drink and watch a girl, and then like, their credit card, like then they wake up the next day and it's like, dude, I blew 4 grand at the bar. Like they just get vampired, right? Like a lot of sex workers are actually vampiring men, right? Like it's whether it's even a waitress that's really using her sexuality to get you to buy more drinks or tips, or like it's really that harvesting. Once the man's in the reptilian brain, you can just hook into them and like harvest out whatever you want, right? And like you see this even on dating websites. Like women are just looking, like you can see in some of these pictures, it's like overtly sexual because they're like, once they hook you, right, they're going to extract resources from you. Like
right.
it's a form of vampirism.
Wow. Yeah, and it's
It's
such a
called red magic. Like that's what the Satanists would call it, red magic,
red
right?
magic. And so you think that it's definitely Satan is behind the whole pornograph. Probably, well, I think they're behind most of what's going on in the world, but they're definitely using that as a weapon.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there's kind of like I don't, I'm going to get controversy if I say there's a Jewish faction of
No,
porn
say
makers.
what you
There
want. Be
definitely
honest.
is
Yeah,
a Jewish
there
faction of
is.
porn makers,
Yep.
but they're not the only ones. And I'm not saying all Jews, but there's definitely a faction of specific, like Jewish, Kabbalistic, Talmudic type
Mm-hmm.
pornography that's being promoted. And then there's also just like dark, occult, satanic pornography as well, right? Like it's, and a lot of, like even what's in porn is very satanic, right? Like just anal or like, getting into darker S&M stuff or like, it's very much like satanic concepts being
Absolutely.
sexualized, right?
Yeah. And I think of that. I think of that too when guys are looking at porn. Like, do they realize how many dicks they're looking at? Like,
Right.
I'm just thinking like, I'm not looking at the dick. I'm looking at the woman, and I'm like, yeah,
Your
but you're
subconscious is looking at the dick.
exactly. So how is like, what do you think that's doing? I mean, is that like that's
I
gotta
think
be
it's, I mean,
causing
okay, let's
damage,
be honest, okay? And I'm not I don't hate gay people or anything. I just like, let's be honest. Obviously something happened that made all of a sudden there be a whole bunch of gay people. Like don't tell me that wasn't orchestrated from an, from somebody creating that and a
right?
certain percentage of people being created that way. Like it didn't just organically happen that all of a sudden every third person is gay. Like
That's true.
that if anybody believes that, like I mean, obviously, and it started with our generation, like kind of the androgyny, right? Like even with the hair bands and guys wearing makeup
Yep.
and tight leather pants, or like, but it wasn't gay back then. It was just androgynous, like, but the guys still pulled it off, right?
Yep.
Like it wasn't
Well,
gay
yeah, that was good.
when
That
those
was the
hair
man.
bands
But yeah, hair
wore
bands.
lipstick, right?
Yep.
Like they were still hot to girls. But I mean that you can see like the seeding of it, right? Like it's just slowly gotten more intense and to what it is now, like where every show, like you can't turn on Netflix and every single show is about being gay. Like it's even if it's
Yep.
like a home renovation show, it's like
They've
the
got to have it
the
in
the
there.
drywaller has to be gay. Like it's just like it doesn't matter. Like they're just programming it in, right? And so that's also through the pornography as well, because a lot of the pornography, even though it's with a woman, it's like a gay type sex, right? And so you're watching that all the time, you're just kind of getting desensitized to it, right?
Yeah, because I think I always thought about that. It's like you're really, and then you get into like what's scary too is as we were saying, it starts off I think innocent, but now like when I did a little bit of research and was searching like all the different categories, I was just like, wow, like this is in my short amount of years I consider on this planet. It's gotten way deeper and darker than I ever thought. And now what really scares me is that they're normalizing, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this because I found this interesting, is a lot of the big searches are for like step parents
Mm-hmm.
hooking up with their stepchild and then they say 18. That's another big one where they don't even barely look of age, but they're for some reason if they're 18 that's fine. And it's really disturbing to me how they're normalizing this, and they're starting to normalize a lot of things that even 20 years ago, or when me and you were growing up, there would have been hell to pay, And oh, okay, we're gonna go back here, and we're just gonna go ahead and get her back on here. Don't worry, guys. But what do you guys think? I would like to hear your guys' comments in the description after this, after you guys watch this, because this is a topic I think that we need to talk about and openly more and really get in discuss it, because it is affecting the world. And when you really start to see how many people are addicted to pornography and how it leads to so many dark things. As I said during the interview, it starts off, I think, very innocent, and then, as Jaymee was saying, you become desensitized. It's like a movie in Hollywood movies. I remember when I was very young, just seeing somebody get shot or something was upsetting to me. Or a horror movie would scare the shit out of me. Like, I'd be scared. And then now I could watch a horror movie and not even bat an eye at it. And they're way more graphically horror now, like more intense horror scenes than they were when I was growing up. There wasn't that, Friday the 13th was pretty much the scariest thing, or The Exorcist, definitely. And the same with porn, right? But now it's just the way they're normalizing this, like, stepdaughter and stepfather, and then the younger ages. It can only lead to something dark, and that's where I want to actually get back into with Jaymee here and talk about this, because I definitely think that it is important that we talk about this. And we got you back, Jaymee.
Hey, so yeah, can you hear me?
I can absolutely hear you. Just get the camera going and we're good to go. I'm just filling it in as we go. I'm just filling it in and giving recaps. I love it. So we're talking about the pornography, the dark side, and how they're normalizing the younger ages, the step-parent relationships.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I mean, that's just all satanic, right? Like, they're really just promoting child abuse and incest, and, like, it'll just get worse. Like, I mean, bestiality, it'll just keep getting worse and worse and worse, right? Because it's basically just desensitization. And so, like, think about if you lived in nature, in the forest, or like whatever, like back in caveman days, whatever people want to believe history timelines are. But you might have seen like one pair of boobs in your life, and that would have been a really big moment for you, and that would have been really special, and you probably would marry that girl and stay with her forever because it was that amazing, right? Like, it was this amazing thing, that this level of intimacy that was so special was crossed this barrier, right? And that would be like enough literally to hold people together for life, like to actually see each other naked. Like, back in the day, that would have been like a really big deal.
Huge.
Right?
Yep.
Like, and I mean, like, you almost had to marry the person. You're like, I've seen them naked. Like, we have to get married now. Like, it's like that and that would like keep them together like for 50 years. Like, it's really crazy if you think about it.
Yep.
And so, part of the reason they want people so desensitized now is because they don't want bonding, right? So, like, and also in nature, you wouldn't ejaculate off 18 times in a row. Like,
exactly.
That just, that wasn't happening, right? And so now, with the technology, and like, men can just keep flipping till something is gonna, like, I mean, and you see these people that'll just do it all day. And I speak from experience because I used to work in a recovery home for addiction, and it was, of course, like, all the guys are coming off whatever substance, and they're literally all in their room just jerking it all day. Like, and I'm like, yeah, like, I'm not stupid. Like, that's your new drug, right? But then they would have this like major depression and stuff because that depletes all their serotonin out, right? So, like, someone who's done that all day, like, you're just a zombie after, right? And then they're looking for something else, like some cocaine or something to like boost you up, because you've literally like depleted out like way beyond what would be a natural amount of energy to expel, right? It's very unnatural to go to that level.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm thinking too that if you're in that, they have men at that state, then you're not going to be you're not going to be willing to fight against any government.
You won't even do anything. You're done, right?
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah, you're done. And so if you look at so there's always been like some type of forbidden pornography in through all culture, but like the forbiddenness was kind of what made it fun. Like, I don't even know why teenagers would smoke pot now, because part of the fun was like, oh my, like the paranoia of like, oh, we're doing something so sneaky.
We're trying to
right?
find
Like, now
it.
it's like whatever, right? So yeah, if yeah, so less was always more, right? Like, so they would have like burlesque dancing or something that was like still quite tasteful. Like, it wasn't like full on some
Mm-hmm.
girl on a stage crawling around on her fours, like grabbing loonies off the stage. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was a girl coming out and maybe dancing kind of cute and something a little bit revealing, right? And that was enough. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yeah, so I mean, and even if you look at some of the original like Playboy and stuff, it's like it wasn't really done in a really degrading way. Like, it was done as like this like wow, look at how this like beautiful woman lays on a
Mm-hmm.
beach or something, right? Like, it was very much like showing beauty that you would never see, because most guys aren't gonna ever see that, right? Like,
Yeah,
it was
that's
like
true.
they were kind of showing it. And so, but then with like Hustler actually was really important in history for kind of taking it down to like a really lower level, right? Where they were like, no, we want like full on,
Yeah, they got away with everything.
showing everything. And
Yep.
then like really degrading, like a lot of the material was like women looking like on a sheet of plastic, like they were a corpse, or like, with bruises on them, or like just really like, like this woman's just been gang raped and now we're taking the pictures, kind of photo shoot kind of stuff, like,
Mm-hmm.
which that was really risque when it came out. Like, people were like, what the hell is this, right?
Yep.
Like, wasn't what they were used to seeing. But another thing that people need to understand is that the way things get paired in the mind. So once you've been really desensitized from what would have ever happened in nature, and then you need something else to even do anything for you, right? Like, it has to be something. And so one of the things they can do is something forbidden, which is why they go against really taboo things, like your stepdaughter or
Okay.
someone you're related to or somebody underage, or like, because there's like a thrill of doing something you're not allowed, right? And so that's what the turn on gets paired with in your brain, is doing something bad is arousing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way our brain works. Um, and so also with the pornography, like, they'll put things that you feel ashamed of after you've seen it, right? So, and you might not have planned to see it, right? Like, you might have Googled something with a not sounding weird term, and then all of a sudden you saw something that you really didn't want to see.
Yeah.
But they do that on purpose, right? Like, they bomb people with things they weren't planning on seeing. And then the person will feel like shame after, like, they're like, oh, I didn't want to see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the more people do that, the shame actually gets triggered to the arousal part in their brain. So they actually need to watch something shameful to even get aroused. So this is how people get sucked into this like really dark, like, they need something really horrible to even get excited, right? Because it's paired in their brain. And that's really the danger of watching this pornography. And it might start out
Wow.
with something like a Hustler, but like, the more you do it, the more you get desensitized, the lower you're going to go. And like, this is really how demons work, right? Like, demons work by pulling you down slowly. Like, and there's always an act of the will at each level, right?
You have to.
And
Yeah.
it's
You have to
incremental.
willingly
It's
do
always
it.
incrementalism
Mm-hmm.
is really how they get you, right?
Because they can't just pull you down quickly, because then people will be like, whoa, this is a shock,
Yeah.
but let's do it gradually, step by step, and slowly
And
desensitize
it's always
you.
a suggestion, right? So you'll see this in porn. It's like you're looking at one thing on the screen, but there'll be like a suggestion that pops in, right? That
Yep.
you
Yep.
didn't look. That's how demons work in your brain from interdimensionally. They'll put an image into your mind as a suggestion, right? And so like, this is just the same thing they're doing through these websites. And it's not just porn, it's like gambling
It
sites
can be, yeah,
or
exactly.
anything
It's
that's kind of like popping little pop-ups in is really dangerous when you're
it's like a
already
little
in a receptive
temptation.
state.
Yep, yep. And it's when you brought up the shame part too. I've talked to people that past people that were addicted to porn, and some that even still do watch it, and they were saying that after they did masturbate, they would have this wave of shame and
Yeah, they
guilt
just
out.
hate themselves. They know they're a
Yeah, and they're
loser.
like, I'm never doing this again. Like, that was my last time, and then 20 minutes later, they're at it again.
Yeah.
And what? And I can speak from at least myself. When I have sex with my wife, there afterwards, there's not this shame that comes along with it. So there's definitely,
Yeah.
at a subconscious level, I think your brain knows what you're doing is fucked up.
And it's a form of theft, right? Because even though these people may have legally consented to being on pornography, like, that person's body wasn't really given to you in intimacy, whether it's
Exactly.
marriage or dating or whatever people do. But like, I mean, you're like a creep looking through a porthole at somebody else's vulnerability. Like that really wasn't for you, you know, like, and like, I think deep down people know that they're like sneaking it and
Right.
stealing it. Like it's not really, it wasn't really given to them. They're like, they just could see it. So they took it. And that's kind of like, there is a real moral aspect to the pornography and like how people get into porn. And there's actually lots of documentaries of ex porn stars that will tell you like, where they were at in their life when they did it and how it affected their life after, and how they got manipulated into it. And I did a real deep dive on like Linda Lovelace, and
That's an
a lot,
interesting one. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the porn stars, like even some of the ones that people sort of think are notorious, like I read all of Linda Lovelace's books. I have them all here. It's like three or four of them. And what was the other? Tracy Lords
Tracy
was another
Lords.
one,
Yeah,
and
she
Jenna
was.
Jameson's books. And like, if you really read these women's books, it'll really change your perception on the reality of pornography. Like, it's not really. Um, Consent is really blurred when people are really traumatized or even under the influence of, imagine if you're on methamphetamine for 10 days and somebody makes a porn with you. Like, was that really consent? Like,
Right.
and a lot of that stuff is really what's going on.
And I think with technology too, back when I was dating, nobody had cell phones and that. So now when I think of people, I would be so scared of somebody filming me if I was on these
Yeah.
dating sites and that. Like these poor women that, they probably are, they don't think that that would happen to them, and then they kind of hook up with these guys, and next thing you know, they're on Pornhub and they got their
Yeah, guys will hide their phones and slip
yes.
something in a girl's drink and then tape it and then upload it to Pornhub. Like, there's a whole bunch of court cases of women trying to get stuff down, but they can't even really prove it's them. Like, it's
Wow.
really horrible.
And the
Like,
destruction that does to anyone, even whether it's a man or a woman that happens to, the damage is just a ripple effect of
yeah,
wow.
I think people like if like however much people want to go into like MK Ultra type of stuff, but like there really is ways of doing mind control on people where somebody would go and do something that they wouldn't normally do. And trauma is really one of those ways. And if you like, there's quite a few documentaries on Netflix. Like, I think there's a couple called like Life After Porn, and then there was another one where they were interviewing that girl. I think her name was Houston, and she did the biggest gangbang like in all of
I've
history or
heard that was
something. Or
crazy.
like, it's just really like, but she was even saying like, I wasn't even in my body. Like, I was not there. Like, there is dissociation, and there is like a lot of people that can go into sex work are really having out of body experiences. Like, they're so disconnected from their body, like stuff's happening in their body and they're not even there. Like, and then that's being recorded. And if you look into the history of, again, I always tell people, go look at who's making porn and like who they are and what they're connected to. Because if you look at even Chuck Trainer, who was Linda Lovelace's husband, like, he was a master hypnotist. Like, he was hypnotizing her and doing like actual mind control on her. And a lot of it was done under coercion and duress and just
Mm-hmm.
extreme abuse, like where she really, her self-worth was like he forced her to sleep with animals and like really horrible stuff that like you don't know unless you read the books behind the movies, right? Like,
Because I think a
so I
lot of
think,
guys think that these women are loving it, and and then once you start looking at this topic, I can't look at porn the same. I just
yeah,
can't. I'm just like, this is so messed up, and I just, once you know,
yeah, yeah.
these
And I mean,
women don't look happy.
I just watched that Rocco documentary on
Okay.
Netflix.
Yep.
And I mean, this is on Netflix where any 10-year-old could put this on after school. Like, it's on Netflix, okay? And not only is Rocco like a really violent psychopath, like
Mm-hmm.
he's hurting those girls. Like, even when the girls are going in, like, they're like, you're gonna get hurt. Like, you're gonna get really hurt going in to do a scene with Rocco. Like, that's what it's all about, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, can you take it? Can you even handle what he's gonna do to you? Because he's really gonna hurt you.
Right.
And these girls are like, yeah, okay, like, great. And it's just, all of it's really horrible. But it's on Netflix and they're showing it, and it's like they're showing really hardcore graphic scenes right on Netflix. Like, I was just
Wow.
floored. Like, I was like, I can't believe this is just on Netflix. Like, I'm talking like really graphic, hardcore scenes.
And they're just, and anybody
No,
can log
no
on.
censorship, no like, just crazy.
Like, yeah, at least when I had to rent porn, I had to be over a certain age or have an adult rent it for me or somebody older than me. Like, it wasn't like it is now. And now, like you said, right on Netflix, there's so many, you can find it anywhere. And that's how we know that there's an agenda behind it. And, yeah, it's really dark, and I can't
Yeah.
look at it the same. I can't, and I not that I've ever was a huge porn fan, and I'm sure people are like, yeah, sure. I'm being honest, guys. It just wasn't my. I don't know. I'd rather have the real thing. I never like strip bars. I never really got into that because I'm like, why am I spending all my money to look at something I can't even touch? Like, it's kind of like I never got it. I mean, have I been there? Yes, I went there and stuff, but not my thing. Porn was never a big thing of mine. I've seen it, like I'm sure as you have, and we all
Yeah, and that's
have.
probably why you're married.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, Mary. That's why. It's true though. Yeah, you're.
right?
It's sad that we're saying that, but it's probably true. And
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
just think about the damage that this is doing and how they're normalizing, and then it gets into how they're normalized, and I see like, and it kind of makes sense how you're saying that they kind of warm you, they're kind of gradually introducing it more extreme, because then that it makes sense to why a lot of people get into the whole child pornography. I
Yeah.
don't think they just start there. I think this is something that
No, no, that's the end
happens.
of the line. And it's not just child pornography, it's like snuff films and like
Right.
violence against sexualized violence against infants. Like it's like the end of the road's really down dark. Like it's another thing too is so that not only have they really been promoting all like S&M stuff really
Mm-hmm.
hard, like they put
Yep.
out the 50 Shades of Grey stuff, which was a way to like bring that kind of into the normal mainstream,
Right.
right? Like where it's not, it's like that would have been something taboo even 10 years ago.
Oh, for
Like, whereas
sure.
now it's like all these like stay at home moms are reading 50 Shades of Grey. Like, it's really, they just brought it into like normalcy, try to normalize that kind of stuff. But another thing to really like understand is the way that torture and stuff works on the brain. And there's also like endorphins and stuff that get released. So a lot of times when people are doing S&M stuff, like they're actually getting endorphins released that and then like dissociating and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
like somebody might go in, like say a consenting adult goes in and says, okay, I'm going to film this scene and consents to that.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they're having that activated in their brain, they can start doing more to that person. And that person doesn't really have the opportunity to say no at that point, because even their flight or fight's been activated in their reptilian brain. Like, what if they're doing a scene on a table with two guys and then all of a sudden they bring four more guys in? Well, that girl's brain's instantly going into flight or fight, and she's going
Mm-hmm.
into like a dissociative freeze state. And so it may appear that she's consenting to things accelerating, and they're taping it, but like that girl's not really there anymore, right? And so that
Right.
happens a lot actually with S&Ms. Like, that's why people do S&M, because they get endorphins and brain changes from these activities, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so consent gets very blurred. And then so people just think, oh, well, if they agreed to do this scene or whatever, then like whatever happens, they consented all. It's really not the truth.
They're kind of slipping it in as the scene's going on, and I think that's important that you
Yeah.
said that. That brings a whole new aspect to it. And what I think about too, which kind of bothers me, is that if you have young men and women watching porn from a young age, I'm sure that they think that this is how sex should be all the time. And that's
Right.
another thing that I try to.
They think it's hurting each other, and that's what I mean. They're
Yeah,
going to go meet a girl they
I
like, and they're
pity
going to
the
go in the
women.
backseat of the car, and he's going to try and do some weird thing, and the girl's going to be really traumatized, and then she's like,
Yeah,
that's probably happening all over, right?
I would think so, and I really feel for women if that's what they're up against, is these guys that are coming into these relationships and they just want to just go crazy on the girl. And I just picture the women going, I don't want to do this, and they're, well, they did it on the Pornhub, and it's like, yeah, well, that's not me. Like, I mean, that's the way I just see it. I really feel for women that have to deal with that, because it's got to be scary. I would be scared for sure.
Yeah, there was a really good documentary. I'm not sure if you could probably find it online, but in Vancouver, BC, they have the studios for kink.com, which the guy says he just started it in his hotel room or whatever, but it really caught on. Like, it's a big company now. And there was a documentary where they were interviewing people that used to work there, and they were saying that like when somebody comes for there for an interview,
Mm-hmm.
like they're normally at the lowest point in their life, like where they're like, I think I'm gonna go make porn. Like I gotta pay
Wow.
my crack dealer, and like it, like
Yep.
they're really at like a really low point when they go in to make a deal with the devil, right? Where they're like, okay, I'm gonna go be in the movies, right? Like it's not like the way it's portrayed, where these people are just like, oh yeah, I love what I do, and of course they do, and like perfect mind control. If you look at MK Ultra or sex slaves, like they don't just want to be allowed to do whatever they want to you. Perfect mind control is when you beg your master to abuse you, like, and you mean it. You're not even acting. Like they've messed your mind up so bad and wired you so crisscross that like you're literally begging for your own abuse, and that's perfect mind control.
Absolutely. And that's what I see that going around the world now with how
Yeah.
people react to government and the medical industry, all across the board.
Yeah, they want you begging for the vaccine. Like they don't just want you to accept it. They want you to demand it. You know what I
Demand
mean?
it.
And you see that with these girls that are like they're demanding to be sodomized with 10 people at once. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
like it's not just allowing it, it's demanding it. And that's really, there's a lot of psychology that goes into that being the end point. It's like people think that just organically happens. Like, no, there's a whole series of things that happen before that's a point where somebody's at that you're watching on a screen.
Wow, I can totally see that, and then I'm glad you brought that up too because it's true. People are begging for their slavery at this point in
Yeah,
the world. They're begging for it in all aspects, and they're
yeah,
actually getting upset when they don't get it. I'm just like, wow, like
yeah.
the controllers are doing a great job, Jaymee. They really are. They're inverting
Hmm.
everything, and up is down and black is white. I mean, they've really people are
Yeah.
just kind of lost. I don't know how to say it any easier. Like the point blank, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Yeah, and the pornography is like one of their main tools. Like I always think of a snake charmer knowing how to charm a snake. Well,
Mm-hmm.
like human beings are really sexually vulnerable. Like if people get turned on, like we like just look at how stupid humans act when they're in love or in lust even. Like I
Yep.
mean, people just do ridiculous things. Like they're like, "Here's the credit card. I'm quitting my job. I'm going moving across this country."
Yeah,
Like
they
people
do.
just do crazy stuff when that part of their brain is activated. And so one of the easiest ways to control human beings is to be able to activate their sexuality because it just shuts off their rational brain, right? That's why it's funny when people are like all these like people that want to follow Aleister Crowley and like talk about love under will and stuff. I'm like, I don't think any human beings ever had love under their will. I'll tell you right now, if you're under love's will and you don't even have free will, like I would say if free will was ever challenged, it would be under love. Like that's, you know, sometimes we've been in love with people and like you're it's not an act of your will, and then all of a sudden you're released from it and you didn't do anything to be out of love with them either. You're just released. Like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an act of the will. Like it's definitely something that overtakes you, right?
So it's a powerful, is what you're saying.
It is
Very
really powerful. And so yeah, humans, like, say we're on a farm, or I actually think of it more of a zoo than a farm, but like that's how they can just train us, is totally through the sexuality. Is like humans are so weak
it's true.
that way.
Yeah. And then you see how they do that, like I was saying, through commercials. It's everywhere.
Oh yeah,
It's
it's like
everywhere that they
a
play
pair
those.
of boobs is like ultimate mind control. As soon as you put it on, they're activated a different part of their brain. It's like so easy, right?
Incredible. And I think of the research that's probably went behind this for, and that's how I know it's satanic too. Is that
Well,
the
yeah, look at the Kinsey research. A lot
Yep,
of the pornography and stuff, it's all connected to the Kinsey research,
yep.
but people can go down that rabbit hole. But I mean, it's all there, it's
People
all
just have
there.
to be willing to look into these dark topics, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion because it has to be talked about because it's getting worse and worse, and the fact that they're normalizing the sexuality of children and it's getting younger and younger. And I keep saying it, and I've had people kind of cringe when I say it, but they're trying to normalize pedophilia.
$100%.
They are working at it, and it's working
Yeah, if they
slowly.
can
It's
keep
working.
you as a child, it's really not too far for them to get you to be attracted to a child because you
Ex-
are one and you're that's what you're relating to. Like
yep.
that's why a lot of these high powered people that are really psychopathic and narcissistic, they actually have the emotional maturity of like a 3 to 6 year old, right? And it's interesting that they're pedophiles because it's like I think there's a real connection there to where they are at emotionally and why they would be attracted to children. Like I think it's very connected, right? And
Yeah.
so if they can get us all to be in that infantile state, it's a lot easier for them to promote that agenda as well.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people like when they think of that, they think of it sexually, but I'm saying it goes deeper than that. This is how it's expressing itself, but there's more going on behind than just being attracted to a child. They're programming, and
Well, yeah, there
do you know what
it's
I mean?
pedophilia is mind control, and it's also vampirism, right? It's really connected.
Mm-hmm.
And for human beings, like, our sexual energy is the most we have as humans,
It's
really.
true.
Like that, like an orgasm, or like even the sex drive. Like I said, you can do really stupid things with it, but you can also accomplish really amazing things with it, like the Taj Mahal, or like,
Yeah.
like once that's harnessed into something, it is a creative life force, and it is like what drives humans to create. And like, so there's, I mean, to harness human sexuality and invert it is such a like powerful way to control humans. Like, whereas like if that energy was held as sacred and channeled into like creative pursuits, like that is one of our most powerful things as humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's that is our energy, like that energy part of our body, like it's physical, spiritual, psychological, and emotional. And so when the Satanists can kind of like separate it all out into like, just effing, like it's like that is very much a way for them to segment off like how a holistic human being would harness that part of themselves
Right.
into creating things and bonding and creating with other people. And it's
It's
it's their most
crazy.
powerful thing I think they have right now on people is that the
And they
pornography.
have, yeah, and they have people right where they want them because, and I'm just thinking as you're talking, I loved what you're saying because I'm really thinking about what you're saying as you're saying it, and it's so true where I see society at right now. I see people that they're scared. Like I was saying earlier, they're at the point now where they don't even want to date. They don't want to meet a partner. It's gone that far, and it's just going to keep, that gap is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And that's when you start to see the evil agenda behind this. I think people look at it, it's just porn. Like don't look at it, but I always tell people look deeper than that. Like get down to the root of what
Yeah,
they're
why is it
trying to
being
do.
given to you for free? I think that's the
Exactly.
number one thing that people could be like, why are there unlimited naked people mating on the internet for me to watch for free? Like, what could be, who's funding this? Like, right? Like,
Yep.
why is this even happening?
Yep.
It's so obvious. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And then like I was saying that then it's getting more extreme too of what they're normalizing because I was thinking like even when you have when they in school at such a young age, you have people coming in like transgender and they're promoting that. They're having gay people and they're promoting that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either, but when you bring it into a school and you're exposing 4 and 5 year olds to it, back when I was going to school, if that was going on in my school, there would have been hell to pay. Parents would have been losing their mind. And now
there
they've
would have
normalized
been
it.
murder committed.
There would have.
Yeah, there,
Absolutely.
that wouldn't even be like, that would have been taken care of. Like,
Yeah.
like,
If we went home and said, told my parents that, oh my God. It just, but now it's becoming normal, and even to the point where if you say anything about it, then you get labeled. And I'm just like, sorry, but this is not an age to be doing this. And I can tell you this from experience, Jamie. I know 3 people in my life that have children, and they are messed up. One of them doesn't know if they want to be gay or not gay, so they're not sure if they like boys or girls. Another one thinks he's too masculine, which I don't understand that at all. He's a guy, and they've convinced him that he's too masculine. And then I know another one that same thing, that they're having trouble even identifying whether they feel male or female. That is not coincidence in nature. This is an agenda.
yeah, it's so, if anybody can't see that at this point, like you are seriously deceived, because it's like, even if this naturally organically unfolded, it would go against nature for it to just all of us, it'd be like the Cambridge explosion, like all of a sudden everyone's gay, like just in one generation, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, and they were all born that way, just like, it's that's not even possible, that
Exactly.
this wasn't the effect of a cause, that, and the cause was intentionally done by people with an agenda to create,
Exactly.
like, and everybody thinks they're an individual, that this is just them, and it's like
They're being mind
it's
controlled. That's what,
impossible.
yeah. And I try, and when you start seeing people around you, that's when you're like, and it's not like just the random person. I know these people, and I'm just like, wow, this
Mhm.
is actually going on. And where I live in Canada, they're not even that hardcore about it, but it's still because of the online presence. It's obviously getting through to them, and now they're at the point where they're questioning their own sexuality, and they're not sure who they identify as, or it's really disturbing when you see it and how it's getting worse.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Wow.
it really interferes with like a person's sense of self, and then also like connected to the shame of watching pornography. Like the more and then when people go online, like if you're not used to being rejected, because you'll like, even if you don't get rejected in normal life, like you consider yourself like a fairly attractive person and like you've normally not been like experienced a lot of rejection. If you go online, everybody gets rejected a lot, right? So like for a lot of people, they just like that really affects them, and then they go and watch the porn and feel the shame, and then it's like they're the more they do that, the less likely they're even going to like put themselves out there to
Mm-hmm.
try and meet somebody and be rejected again, because they already feel shameful and like so
Yeah.
it's just this like never, it's like quicksand, it's like this never ending cycle where people are just regressing down into this pit of like shame and like
And
low self-esteem and no
right.
sense of self. And it's like I don't know. And I'm not like, I do have compassion for people. Like, I think people are morally accountable. And I think that if anybody's saying that porn is amoral and that everything's consensual, I think you're really lying to yourself, and you really need to do some history, like
Mm-hmm.
researching people that have been in porn or made porn, and, really looking at the PTSD that people have after doing these things. And, like for life, it's like it might even take 5 years for them to really have the effects of what they did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it affects them later in life. Especially like these really young girls making pornography when they're like 18 or whatever, like just 18. And then, it's not really gonna, like their brain's not developed either, right? So it's not really gonna really hit them what they've done until they're like 25, or, trying to get married or have kids or something. And they're
Right.
like, whoa, like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? But they
Yep.
got really manipulated into it. And um, so I'm not trying to like judge people, because I really do see that this is like something like being used as a weapon, like is weaponized
Mm-hmm.
against people, and like, so if people are being affected by it, it's like they really actually need help. And like the first part of help is like being honest about it. And I think it's really amazing that like you had me on your show to talk about it too, because I think just men talking about it is really powerful too, because a lot of times it could just seem like girls bitching about porn is
Right. Yeah.
not as effective as like actual men saying, you know what, bro, like this is like not cool, like
Right.
and I think that really needs to become a trend right now, where people are like, you know what, no, this isn't normal, like this is not normal.
Yeah. I'm so thankful that you did come in, and grateful that you came to chat with me, because it's and I'll keep saying it, it's a discussion that has to be had more, because I think it's I know it's affecting relationships and people on an individual basis on a drastic level. And I'm sure some people even watching go say, I don't watch any porn, so why it's not me. You may not be the one watching the porn, but it's still affecting the whole relationship between a man and a woman, and between anybody, and it's still, and your children, it's affecting you in some way. So
Yeah, it's really about the children too, because like I said, I mean, I think there's one documentary called, I think it's called Over 18 maybe. And it's about like they were finding like these young kids addicted to porn, like little boys that are like 8, 9 years old were like
wow.
sneaking to see it, and like they instantly are addicted, because they've never, like that's just going to blow their mind, right? Like it's not even, it shouldn't even be on their radar, right? And um they were like really, yeah, watch that documentary, like it'll really open your eyes to like what really happens if like an 8-year old sees this stuff. Like I don't think they're
Yeah.
ever going to be normal ever. Like
Or
you've
definitely
crossed a
not.
line you
Yeah.
can't undo, you can't unboil an egg, right? Like, and like when a human being becomes sexual, that's like a really big threshold, right? It's like when you
It's a big moment.
become, yeah, like it's a big change in your consciousness and like stuff from like a state of innocence, right? Like, and you can't ever go back over that. And like that's why sexual abuse is so like I've worked in social work for a long time, and like people can overcome, being beat or poor, like, but like
Mm-hmm.
sexual abuse really messes people up forever, because like you really can't undo it, and you've interfered with a natural progression of how a human being's supposed to evolve into their sexuality. And like if you do that prematurely, like it just interferes with a human being. And like, looking at what the Satanists are doing with all the pedophilia and stuff, it's like it's very intentional that they're interfering with that part of humanity. And
Yep.
it's just something that is like a permanent damage that it's not worth like.
Like because you've worked with a lot of victim, like of people that have suffered that, and that with porn addictions and sexual abuse. What's the process of even getting? If somebody has a porn, like say somebody's listening right now and they're watching, they have a porn addiction, and they're being honest with themselves. How? It's not as simple as saying turn it off. That doesn't work. I
No,
mean,
because it's an act of your will, and your will has already been weakened by
how
the
do you get
instant
out of it?
gratification of pornography. And so, I mean, there's different schools of thought with pornography. Like for me personally, I think that understanding rationally the immoral um, aspects of pornography, where you're like, I'm actually causing harm and
Mm-hmm.
participating in harm, and like to myself and others. And like, just if you can evolve your consciousness to the point where you're like, I'm doing something wrong, and I'm not gonna do it, that can actually be more powerful than like somebody trying to go on a diet saying, oh, I'm just gonna, like, I don't think anything's wrong with it, but I'm just trying to back off. Like that's
Yep.
never gonna work. It's like quitting smoking or something. People, you're not gonna use your willpower just to quit porn. Like you have to actually have a change in your consciousness where you're like, no, this is not who I am. This is not who I want to be. This is not what I want to be a part of. And like, it's not okay, and it's not normal, And then you can get support with that. And it's like addiction support, right? So you can get addiction counseling, or like, I mean, there's rehabs and stuff too that people can go,
Interesting.
like, it's, what I mean? And you have to like resensitize yourself. Like some people even have to just get off of, like, they have to like have a lock on their phone, because it's like, and then maybe they just go to magazines for a while, like, because then they have to force themselves to at least use their imagination a little bit. And that's, that can, I mean, I don't think that's the best way, but I
But
think that can
it's
be
a
like
way,
maybe a
yeah.
last resort, better than nothing for somebody to start. But it's like any addiction, right? You're gonna have to overcome the addiction, and you can. It's just not going to be easy.
It's a more of a morality. You have to start really diving
I
in and
think,
questioning your morality
yeah,
and
I think the morality, like if you can change your like spiritual consciousness to like, this isn't who I'm going to be in my life, then I think that you'll have a lot more of an empowered position than somebody who's just trying to, somebody who's quitting but doesn't really want to because they don't really see something wrong with it. That's not going to work.
it's your consciousness and your morality that and the stuff that I think that people that are honest with themselves and they do what the term shadow work, now everybody's using it,
Mm-hmm.
but I really
Yeah.
do think that that's where the changes are going to happen with a lot of things that are going on with people. Is that's where we at, that's what the work that needs to be done. And you said it right at the beginning, actually, if you remember, that this is a something that people have to work on themselves. This isn't an external solution, it's an internal. This is
Yeah, because we're not going to erase all the porn unless there's some type of whatever, an
It's
event
still
that
creep up.
clears
It's
all of
still
the
creep
data
up.
off of all of
Yep.
some like nuclear event that erases all of everything we've recorded,
Yep.
which would be great.
It
But
would be great, but
I
they'd be
think the
painting it
stuff's
on
there
caves and
recorded forever now, and so we really have to spiritually and morally overcome, like, where you could be like that alcoholic that goes and sits in a bar, and you're not going to drink because you're just not, because you decided you're not going to be that person,
yep.
and it doesn't matter what's around you or where you are, because that's how the porn's always going to be there, and the stuff that's been recorded is going to be unlimited available now, so you're never going to get away from it.
You have to do the work on yourself. And that's what it boils down to. It seems a lot of the conversations I have with people, that's what it boils down to. It's a spiritual check on yourself, a morality check, and you have to start learning this, taking in this knowledge and changing from the inside. That's what a lot of it is, just common sense too, but it just seems that we've lost that. We've lost that common
Yeah.
sensibility.
And like, be honest with what it's costing you. Like if something seems too good to be true, it is. You know what I mean? Like you can't eat cake every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just because you can, you shouldn't, right? Like, and like think that is with the porn too. Like, I think people are in a lot of denial of it, and they're like, oh, it's not a problem, I'm fine. And it's like, no, it really is costing you. Like, it's costing you your relationships, it's costing you your health, it's costing you your mental health, it's costing you spiritually. It's probably maybe even costing you money, like going out and trying to like spend money to get a bunch of women. Like, I mean, I think a lot of guys are starting to realize like how much money they're spending to being suckered into this stuff, right? Like, they feel vampired after, you know what I mean? Like,
that's very true.
You know, even people that are paying for stuff, or like they, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think afterwards they feel violated, that they got manipulated that way. You know what I mean? Once their reptilian brain once they go back into their higher brain, they're kind of like, what was I doing? Like,
yeah, what am I doing? Right. And that's so true. But wow, I'm just looking at the time where I could talk to you. I could talk to you for 5 hours. I really could. So I hope that you'll come back.
Enough for one night.
I know. I really do hope, though, that you'll come back to do a part 2, because I think we're just starting to really scratch the surface. And I really want to get into the satanic ritual abuse. And I know you're very passionate about that. You do a lot of work and research on that, Jaymee. Yeah. So that was what I want to do part 2 on. So I hope we can do that soon. But before I let you go, I know you are an avid reader. As you said, you are constantly reading. You're like my wife. She's constantly reading. What are you reading? I wish we could focus in a little better, but...
Yeah, I don't know why my screen's like that. I never put a blur on.
It's weird, but if you can't see it, everything that she shows here, I will put a link to get the book in the description. So just let people know what you're reading and what it's about. And I know you sent me a list of a few to get, which are already on their way. So I'm really excited to get them.
Sucks.
And if you kind of move it to your left, I don't know if that'll. For some reason, it's kind of trying to focus.
So this one is called The Dark Side of Cupid by Eve Lorgan. And you can actually get a PDF version of the first book that she wrote, and it's called Love Bites. And it's a really interesting book I just read, because this woman, I believe she's a clinical counselor. And so her work, again, was really academic, where she was doing counseling for people with anomalous trauma, which is like abductions, MK Ultra, SRA, anything that normally you might sound crazy if you went somewhere and told somebody. She was kind of doing the counseling for these people, and really recording it in a really scientific way, like what was similar between what people were reporting or whatever. And it's talking about love bites is basically like interdimensionals interfering in human relationships, because again, they don't understand our emotions, right? So they're almost like, it was almost like these evil cupids were pairing people in relationships where they knew they would be extremely traumatized, because then they can study like the human emotions of like obsession and like being devastated after a breakup, and like
that's interesting.
Really interesting books. If you can get, number 1 is Love Bites, and number 2 is The Dark Side of Cupid. This lady's research is just, I've never read any books like this. It's really interesting. And then again, she goes into like some of these different types of vampires, like just psychopathic vampires, or
interesting. I got to get that one too.
Yeah. I just read them and they're like mind blowing. These books are a little bit new age, so I don't really believe with everything she talks about. Like, don't talk to entities she's recommending in this book. But aside from that, these Hands of Light books are really good for looking at the aura kind of stuff, and how different types of vampires kind of hook into you energetically, and how they kind of even look a certain way, like in their bodies and in their energy bodies and stuff. And it's really interesting reading for that kind of stuff too.
That sounds great too.
This book, I don't know if you can see it, The Subtle Body by Cindy Dale. She kind of covers all of the different energy body stuff from all different cultures through all time. It's like an encyclopedia that'll just give you like a little taste of everything, from like chakras to acupuncture to auras to Kirlian photography to like, it's all connected.
That sounds like a great one, because it gives you, like you said, a little taste of everything, and then you can really focus in.
Of your energetic anatomy. And so this one is, I recommend everybody have that one in their library, because it's just a really good go-to. That's pretty much what I've been reading lately. I just finished these books, Character Disturbance by George Simon, and he also wrote In Sheep's Clothing, which is about psychopaths and sociopaths that are kind of covert aggressive and how they hide it. So we see this really played out today with politicians. And,
absolutely.
people in churches and everywhere, right? Like are just really coming across as good people, but they're really not. And
Yeah.
those are
Wow.
really good books to arm yourself with information too. And then I was also reading, I don't know if I would totally recommend this guy's book because he has a little bit of conspiracy cover up with like Waco and stuff like that.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't buy his official story.
And what's that book called to the author?
Um, Dangerous Personalities by Joe Navarro, but this is just a really good book for profiling like people that are likely to be like really emotionally unstable or become predators. Like there's actually a lot of warning signs you can look for.
Well, that
I
might be
like to
good.
read that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Me too. Yeah, that your library must be amazing.
Yeah, my library is really amazing. I
I
will
mean,
say.
I'm sure when people come over and look at it, they're like, "What is she into?" But I would be fascinated. I'd be like, "Oh my god!" Like, I mean, yeah, it's just amazing. Like the
My
books.
books are really unique. I'm really proud of like how unique, like I have a lot of books that nobody else would really have. Like I've really collected them from really weird places and used bookstores and garage sales, and like really like I feel like I have a very unique eclectic collection of books that are really not easy to find. So
Yeah, that's what makes it really cool, and the fact that also that you, Jamie, that you're looking into these topics that are, like I said at the beginning, people consider them dark or evil or whatever tag you want to put on them. But I think that this is the knowledge that people need to be taking in because it's going to let you know what you're up against. I'm so sick of people saying, "Don't look at the negative, don't focus on it. You're going to draw it into you." And I'm like, that's the whole trick. To me, is what they're putting
yeah,
on people. That is,
yeah, and that was really promoted through the New Age, which
oh,
is there's a
yeah.
lot of Satanism covered in rainbows and butterflies and crystals that are really, gives you this really pretty package. But if you really look at what they're showing you, it's like just become really passive and don't look into anything and just focus on
Yeah.
the positive, even though like your arm's being amputated, just like
Yeah, it's like
imagine
don't
it's
look at that.
not. And
Yeah,
like,
and that drives me crazy when people tell me that. I was saying to you, and I said, well, I was connecting back to you. I held up the Satanic Bible I'm reading. I'm like, and I was telling you during when you were on with Jonathan and I that when I told a few people that I was reading that book, they lost their mind. Like I was just like, wow, and they're like, you're gonna turn satanic, and I'm like, no, I'm just reading. It's just knowledge. It's what I do with it, and it just shows you how quickly people react to stuff that makes them uncomfortable. It was really fascinating to see that reaction.
yeah, I believe knowledge is power. And but I mean I'm kind of like I actually I threw the Satanic Bible out after I read it. Like I was like, okay, I've already read it, I don't need it in my house. Like I really
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm
don't,
not gonna
like I
frame it
really
or
did get
yeah.
rid of it after,
Yep.
but I still read it.
It's very as I was telling you when I'm almost done it. It's not what people think it is. It's not. Trust me, guys. It's not what you think. It's more like just to be an asshole. It's what it's teaching you to be. Like it's selfish is what it
Yeah, and I
is.
think that Mark Passio's work is really helpful to understanding that like the de facto Satanism, where like a lot of people really like are Satanists without knowing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's really unless you actually go and educate yourself on their ways of thinking and agendas, you might even be one and not know it,
Yep.
even if you think you're a good person and stuff. Like if you don't actually know what their tenets are and their philosophies are, like you probably are being one a
Yep.
lot of the time without even knowing it.
It's the way that they're mind controlling people to be. I mean that you have everything against you, steering you into that mindset. So of course people are going to be picking up these traits and living this religion without even knowing it. I don't care if people say I don't believe in it. I it doesn't matter. You're still living it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very
And we were
fascinating.
laughing before the show too, because you could buy the Satanic Bible from Avon. So
Isn't that crazy, guys? From like Avon, like I don't know, but as I was saying to Jamie, I don't know what you do. You run a bath, you put your bubble bath in you bought from Avon, and you grab the Satanic Bible. I was just like,
yeah,
what?
I saw it for sale there. I couldn't believe it. I'm like,
I wish you would have got a picture of that. That would have been an amazing thumbnail.
yeah, we might be able to find it
Yeah, have a look. I'm gonna look too.
online. But yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely was. They had the book section in their catalogs, and it was on there. So
interesting. Well, that's crazy. What a great. I mean, thank you so much, Jamie, for coming on. I really really was looking forward to this and really enjoyed it. And I hope you will come back for a part two, which you said you would. So I'm very excited about that. And then I want to really dive into the satanic ritual abuse that's going on. Um,
which is heavily connected to porn. So yeah,
Exactly. And I
would
just
love
figured
to
that
go into that. I think today I was just kind of going on the surface, but there's a whole level that
that's where I want to go. I want to kind of warm people up, and then now I really want to dig into that. And I knew it was connected because we were talking about it. So, and I first heard about like this whole thing through Jay Parker. He was one of the first people I saw give a presentation a few times on it. And then as I was telling you, I didn't realize how big it was, how prevalent it was, how bad it's going on. Like it really opened my eyes, and so I'm really looking forward to diving. And that's why I wanted to make it a part 2, because that's a whole show on its own, just on that one topic. So I figured let's warm people up and then really get into the darker stuff and what what the stuff you've been researching and really talking about.
Okay.
It'd be great to have you on. So thank you so much. I mean, I really enjoyed this. It was a great way for me to spend Valentine's Day. It was fun.
Happy Valentine's, everyone.
You too.
Sorry if we ruined your porn plans for the evening, but
I know.
Hey, buck up. Be a better human being.
Exactly. But yeah, I just got to end the show. If you want to stick around, Jaymee, in the back for a second, it's up to you. I just got to put you kind of in the green room here and then wrap up the show, and I'll be right back with you in about 3 minutes.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Bye.
All righty. Let me just head over here and close the show up for you guys. All right, guys. Thank you so much once again for joining me and coming to the Crypt tonight. I know it was a tense discussion. It was a dark discussion, but I think it was one, and I will keep saying it is one that needs to be had. And I want to thank my guest, Jaymee Jay, for coming and sitting here this evening with me and with us discussing this topic. Very important. And we're going to be doing a part 2 very soon, which I'm definitely looking forward to talking about. It's another, it's going to be a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. So stick around, guys. Keep checking back to make sure that you catch part 2 when we do it. And we're going to be getting into a lot of important things that kind of tie into what we talked about tonight. So thank you guys so much. Don't forget, I am also, if you're a fan of radio, don't forget to check me out. I'm at revolution.radio. I'm on Friday nights, 8 p.m. till about 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the Hawk's Nest. Then we have the Crypt Rick and Jonathan show with my amazing co-host, Jonathan Wright, a great friend of mine who is amazing. And we're on Saturdays in Studio B, and that is from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then my original show that I started doing on Revolution Radio, which is Monday evenings, once again, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A. If you're a fan of radio and just listening to a podcast, please check it out, guys. Amazing stuff. So thank you once again, guys. I will be back very soon with part 2 with Jaymee, and I'm looking forward to that too as well. So take care, stay safe, peace, guys, and love each other because we need it out there, guys. Stay safe.
Are you interested in the paranormal? Murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.